Hi, welcome to the latest podcast. Would you believe it? He's just told me off for messing about again. It's not on. Oh, here's Chris. Everybody meet Chris.
Hello.
Hi Chris, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Welcome to the latest Accelerate podcast.
Thank you very much.
And we're back home.
Indeed.
We're no longer away.
Well, it's nice to be invited in.
Pleasure to have you. For those that don't know Jonesy, he's one of our team athletes, and we're going to continue the theme of what we're talking about with Patagonia. But I'm going to leave Chris to introduce himself first of all. Chris, so who's Chris?
Well, I'm Chris. I'm one of the team athletes.
He's Chris.
I've been in the team for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
So I'm also an academic. I work at university. My field is in sustainable food systems, so that's what I do when I'm not out running. So yeah, that's me really.
Yeah, you're doing a PhD at the moment as well, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. So does that make you Dr. Jones?
It will do when I eventually do it. I've been an academic for a decade, and it took me 7 years to hook up the courage to start it part time. So I'm in my fourth year now of 5 years.
So if you become Dr. Jones, are we allowed to call you Indy?
Can
you have a hat and a whip?
Well, I'm thinking my first lecture when I go in after getting my PhD, I should wear a Stetson.
Oh, I absolutely think so, yeah.
And have some theme tune music as well.
Are you going to have your own, or are you just going to pinch a bit?
Just going to rip it off the
rip it off. Okay, so sustainability, running. Let's talk about that.
Sure, let's do it.
So I think it, for a lot of people, in fact probably all of us, it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, at the minute, from a government point of view, we're getting right mixed messages, and it seems a lot of that we're being asked to do seems quite big, and I feel like sometimes we just need to understand what we can do that's breaking it down and actually doing some good. And if we all did these little things, it would make a big difference. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sustainable development as a concept is quite a broad concept, and it's quite complex in itself. And I think often when people think about sustainability, they just think about, oh, I'll do a bit of recycling, or I'll do some things that are environmentally good for the environment. But I think sustainable development as a term is defined as, it's development that can meet the needs of the current generation, so us, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's about long-term sustainability in itself, and it has 3 broad kind of aspects. So it has the aspect that we all think about, which is the environmental aspect. How can we be more environmentally friendly, and what can we do about that? And there's obviously big implications of that in the running community as well. But it also has the social and the economic dimensions as well. So running as a construct can have a massive impact on local communities. It brings people together. So there's a really strong social dimension to sustainability. And I think often we automatically just think about it as the kind of the environmental aspect. But it's also the economic sustainability as well. So, sustainable development is about things like gender pay gap, no poverty, economic growth. So it is a really kind of broad subject.
It's massive, isn't it? At the end of the day, the whole concept of it. Yet there's also a lot of things. It's we run and we breathe the air, and I guess you could argue we breathe it quite deeply. We're running down the streets, and let's be honest, we're running against all these cars kicking out fumes, and I know it's kind of the way it is, but it's just finding ways, isn't it, that we can actually make it healthy, not just for ourselves but for everybody. And it's the whole concept. And it's like we're regularly down the OLP, and I just do simple things. I pick up the bottles the kids are throwing on the floor, and the bin's literally 10 metres away.
Yeah. One of the things I always remind myself is I'm a lecturer in sustainability, and I'm not perfect. And one of the things I think is important to remember is that we're all hypocrites. to some extent, because every action, every
absolutely.
activity that we do has an environmental impact. We can't function as a society without carbon emissions, for example.
No,
so trying to have a ideological perfect outcome to anything that we do is not achievable.
Yeah,
so it's about thinking, how do we mitigate some of those things that we do, and how do we reduce the impact that we can do, and that's in principle what sustainable development is. It's not, we have to meet our own needs as a society. We're going to have a carbon impact,
so
it's going to be
is that accepting we're going to have a carbon impact, but finding the best ways of actually either reducing that or just mitigating that in some way, and I guess I always talk about, if we all did the little things, it will be so much better.
I think there's macro and there's micro activities. It is to an extent, because there's an individual responsibility that we all bear, and there are things that we can do as individuals to reduce our own carbon footprints, and then there's the more macro global issues that governments, organisations have a much wider impact. If we all did a little bit more recycling, it's not really going to change the way in which we're going as planet. But it's about having a sustainable mindset.
Okay.
So if we all had a sustainable mindset, and we all understand that the things that we do have an impact, then that's how we kind of evolve culturally, I think, as a society.
Okay. So what you're saying is, if we all have a mindset change, or a mindset change to some of the things that and actions we take, then actually that's better than not doing something. And are you saying that if it's small but we're all doing it, then that's actually suddenly becomes a big thing?
Absolutely. I think some of it's all the small interactions and all the small things that we do, we have to think of it as the kind of sum of all those parts. So, if we all made a small contribution collectively, that's a big impact.
Okay.
But
so
this idea and this attitude that someone go, well, you're not doing it, so why should I? It's quite, there's a definite benefit in everyone making a small impact, because that those small ripples can create those kind of waves of change, and that's and that those micro aspects need to be combined and coupled with the more of the global initiatives that come through legislation and policy as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because some of the small things we talk about from a team point of view are actually quite social as well. They're quite fun, because it's simple, isn't it, to say, and I know this is something you're going to mention, you're giving us all a lift home tonight because we all live in a similar area. That's one car.
Yeah.
That's not 3 cars or 4 cars.
Yeah, and
if every person in a running club actually shared a lift home or to the track, for example, that's got to be a good thing. If we all started doing that, if we could, of course, because some people might live somewhere else or are coming straight from work, and that a different complexion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. But even that car in itself will have an impact. It will, unless it's even. Could be an electric car, but even electric cars have an environmental impact. So the activity will always have an impact. But if we can mitigate and reduce that by carpooling, sharing lifts, then it's going to reduce that impact. But we have to see past this idea that there's this perfect scenario where no one has an impact, because it always will exist.
It does exist.
Yeah, it's an effort. It requires a will and drive, a mindset, and an effort to behave in a more environmentally conscious way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, we've always done that from day one, haven't we? We've always said and I can remember that going back to when Stu Walker was in the team. He was always big on saying, right, we're going to share lifts.
Mm.
And we would meet at a point and all go down together, and we quite often walk to that point. Or Stu would pick a couple of people up to come down to the OLP when we were down here, then we'd all go pile into his car and go back. He would drop us off us away, then I'd walk up the hill
to
get home. And we always saw that as like a positive thing to do because that reduced from 4 cars down to 1. And I noticed when we go to races, we do the same. And I've noticed a lot of clubs now are putting out car share to go to races.
Yeah, and absolutely. But also, if you think back to what I said before about the 3 kind of main dimensions around sustainability, there's an economic benefit there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
So that if you're going on a long journey, 4 people going individually, it's going to cost 4 lots of fuel.
So
4
lots
people
of
going in the same
£50.
car is going to be cheaper. So it's that interaction between the economic, the environmental, and the social, because everyone gets to sit in a car and enjoy it as well. So I think that's where, in a kind of nutshell, how those 3 aspects kind of interact with each other.
Okay, so it's more we should be doing and thinking more along those lines. I mean, is there an argument that if there's a half marathon in, say, our local town and one 50 miles away on the same weekend, should we all be doing the local one?
I think
it's a tough one, isn't it?
It is difficult because we all have different goals and aspirations, and we need to make decisions that are right, because someone not travelling outside of their immediate area to race versus someone that goes 3, 4, 5 times a year abroad, that's obviously a very big there's a very different impact, and some people will only stay in their local area. But I think what's important, if we're going to get to a position where we can really kind of progress in the way that we need to meet the Sustainable Development Goals were brought in 2015, and 2020 to 2030 is supposed to be the decade of action, and we're supposed to be meeting these Sustainable Development Goals by the end of this decade, and we're nowhere near on that journey to meet those needs. But if we're gonna be able to do that, there is an element of sacrifice to some extent.
Okay.
However, also you've got to balance that with your own personal goals as well. So if you want to go away once a year, and no one's saying you shouldn't be going on holiday, for example, or you shouldn't go and race UTMB because you want to go and experience that. But if you're doing 5, 6, 7 races a year, then maybe you've got to reflect on that and think, is this in line with my values and my goals, and is this what I want to achieve? But certainly we shouldn't feel guilt, and we shouldn't let guilt be a limitation to kind of achieving our aspirations and our goals in running, I think. Even if there are some pretty wicked local races.
Yeah, there are. But, so basically what you said there is, what I heard was, sit back, have a little think, and just look at what you are doing, and is that okay?
Yeah, and there's companies...
and try and find a way of balancing things.
Absolutely. There's companies that specialise in calculating individual carbon footprints, like My Carbon, for example. You can put all your data into that, how many times you travel, what you eat, where you work, and they will estimate what your annual carbon output is. So you can benchmark that against other people, for example, and then they can give you ideas and ways to reduce your environmental impact. Because if you want to travel, that's fine, but maybe you limit your environmental impact in other ways. So for example,
we hear that
if you're vegetarian, so you don't eat meat's, when that's my expertise around the food system, but meat contributes to a third of all food emissions is from meat. So reducing your meat consumption is probably the single biggest thing that you can do to reduce your environmental impact. So maybe you shouldn't feel guilty about going to race in France because you're already making decisions that are in your best interest.
Okay, that's tough. What about things like running kit, clothing, equipment?
I think the principle of reduce, reuse, recycle, I think is probably the best way to think about it. So running kit, running has an environmental impact like everything, but comparatively speaking to other sports, it's relatively low.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we should be unconscious about what we do. We should still manage our own impact, but if you compare running to like Formula 1, for example, it's very different. Running is quite a simple sport. You chuck on a pair of run shoes, you go for a run. It doesn't need much equipment. However, now we're seeing the way that kind of running is increasingly popular. I think there's 1 million people now in the UK that run, and there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more competitive runners, and with that becomes having the best kit. People wanting to make performance gains, and that's all brilliant. It's brilliant for the sport, but still the impact is relatively low. I think we should think about, do we need the kit firstly, and if we do need the kit, what's the best kit to buy? So not just in terms of buying kit that's using recycled content, for example, recycled shoes, which you'll be much more of an expert in that area than I am, but retailers now are, from what I see, are starting to integrate a lot more recycled materials into their products, which is great. Durability of the kit as well.
I think durability is a big one, because I was talking to someone the other day, and there was a really good conversation around effectively what was perceived as the value of some recycled kit, because it on the face of it appeared to be more expensive. And the thing that actually turned the argument was it was the value for money in this particular case was because it would last longer because of the way it was made, and it was made to a very high standard to be able to last a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that again is important, because it's also, we've had that come down to us as from a team point of view, because obviously Scott give us support, but they only want to give each year everybody a new t-shirt. Anything else is only if it's actually broken, failed, can't be repaired, and actually has worn out and needs to be replaced. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with a glut of kit, if you like, almost from a sponsor where it's readily available. And we've had that for a while. And when we get, what I love as well is when we get new people coming into the team, we've actually got the more established runners like, well, I've got a couple of spare t-shirts, I'm passing them on.
Yeah,
I think it's a t-shirt from Stu Walker's talking about the third person.
Yeah.
But it's great.
I think we've got to be careful running.
They smell.
Running as a sport needs to be careful as an industry that it comes quite fashionable. And I think with the profile and the way that running is now, and the increasing in popularity, that we all want to look good, we all want to feel good. Good quality clothes make us look good. If we look, that feeling inside of having the latest pair of shoes, that the whole kind of psychological aspect of that helps with performance, helps how we perceive our running and whatnot. But it's functional kit as well at the same time, and it needs to provide that.
I mean, whatever you do, if it's recycled, it's got to do the job. It's got to have an environmental benefit, and that needs to be transparent so people can see it and understand what that means. For me, the biggest thing is it does have to still be functional and well made and last. We had a big brand that actually to keep the cost of the product down, which on the face of it seemed really good, but the rate of failure increased on that product line. And it was because all they did was very simply, they took out 2 bar stitches on key areas because it saved money. And the product started coming back, failed in those 2 areas. We kind of went, look guys, we actually stopped that brand.
Yeah, I think with t-shirts and things like polyester is that it requires an incredible amount of water resource to actually
also
produce
on polyester, your polyester
as well. So we often think about carbon because that's what's always thrown at us, isn't it? The carbon impact, carbon emissions, CO2, but actually there's a lot of aspects of sustainability, and the water footprint and our water resource is a real concern. The quality of our water, and it takes a lot of water to produce a t-shirt. So buying good quality kit that you're going to wear that's durable, yes, and if it's more expensive, you've got to balance the longevity of that. It may be more expensive, but if you buy good quality expensive stuff that lasts, you spend less in the long term, and that requires a certain level of kind of thought in terms of being comfortable.
It is, and it's also
with that.
The other point is as well, if you buy decent stuff like a t-shirt, for example, you're quite often, it's great in the summer and it's great as a base layer. And again, you've got to have that knowledge when you're purchasing the stuff to say, well, is this just a summer t-shirt? And probably the quality of the actual polyester fibre itself is not as good as something that's designed to go all year. And then of course you've got things like merino kicking in now. But I had somebody in the other day saying merino's great, it's sustainable, and I said, yeah, but it goes onto a nylon frame.
Yeah.
To actually make the products on a nylon frame. And the next question is that nylon recycled, for example? So there's actually a whole range of stuff, but I think for me, that unless you disagree, it's buying stuff that we genuinely need, it's functional and we like it, we've got to like it, and it's either repairable or it's going to last like a lifetime.
Yeah, and there's the traceability and the provenance of the products as well, so knowing how the products are made and where they're made.
Yeah, so
are
the
they
up and
made
down
in
cycle.
conditions that are ethically, it's not just about the environmental impact, there's the ethical impact as well. You know, where are the products being made, who's making them, are they being made by, you know, in compliance with ethical standards. What we're seeing now a lot more in races, that race organisers are starting to move away a little bit from kind of gratis free t-shirts with races, which is great. You can get a reduced fee if you don't want a t-shirt, which is great. That's, or you pay extra, and that's what we would call them a default nudge. So the default is no t-shirt, you can pay a supplement with a default, and that's my research area, and that's nudge theory, and that's what Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize for in 2017, and it's about changing the default and about having it as an extra, and that's so how we frame the decisions that people make will influence the choices that
And giving people the
choose.
choice as opposed to...
Yeah, it needs to have I mean, what Richard Thaler would describe as libertarian paternalism, and it's the fact that you still need to have that freedom of choice. People need to make the decision themselves, but we can nudge them in the right way. An example would be how you set the shop up and where you put the products, and where you put the products in the shop will determine what people choose to have. So.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, but it's balance, isn't it? But yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's also I quite like the fact that we are starting to see actual shoes with recycled content coming through. We also hear of brands that actually don't advertise what they're doing with recycled content. And would you believe it's because there's always somebody that says, but you're not doing this. So they actually get flack, not for what they can do, but for what they're not doing. And that's also sometimes people can be correct, but sometimes it's born out of the fact that actually to change a product takes a couple of years. It can't happen overnight.
Yeah,
we think it should, but it can't.
I'd be really interested to see customers' perceptions of recycled content in running shoes. I'm sure there's been it's not my research field, but I'd be interested to see whether or not if something is advertised as being recycled in a performance shoe, whether or not that would be seen as a positive or as a negative, and the implications of recycled content on...
Let's put it this way, I tell you what, it's not been as quickly adopted as a carbon plated shoe was.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also one of those areas where we haven't got many customers coming in and asking, do you have t-shirts that are recycled? Do you have any recycled shoes? I mean, I've been wearing the Scott recycled shoe, and I've done a bit of running in it. I really enjoy it. Actually, from a walking around comfort point of view, it's become one of my go-to shoes.
Yeah.
And I'm finding them very comfy, and it's as simple as that. You know, I'm coaching this evening, I'm going to keep them on my feet. Hope it's not too cold tonight though, Chris.
It's quite cold.
It's just changed, hasn't it? Weather's gone mad. Anyway,
let's hope this goes out at the right time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, it will do. If it doesn't, we're in trouble. I kind of look at it and go, what's the problem? Give them a go. We have sold them, don't get me wrong, and we have got brands actually now starting to say this is becoming one of our lines. Saucony this time next year will have 3 shoes available, 2 road, 1 trail, that will basically be in their green line, as they're calling it.
Yeah.
And they're very conscious of what's happening from factory through to disposal, and I believe in Europe they've already started a recycling of those shoes, a scheme. And they're looking at how they can bring that into the UK. Just as a side issue, we have a recycle bin here for shoes that we can get recycled. But because of red tape, it's a German company and they ship them out in containers, they're going to stop taking UK shoes. And it's because of red tape and customs issues. And it's just become a nightmare for them. And you kind of think really?
Yeah, and I think
that's kind of disappointing.
I think the messaging on the longevity of products as well has got to be clear, and it is difficult. It's a balance for brands, isn't it? Because brands, organisations, in order to make money, they need to sell products. So it's almost counterintuitive to develop a shoe that lasts twice as long as your competitors, because you'd think, well, we're gonna sell twice as much. So
Yeah, well,
half as much. So
I'm not convinced we don't see £20 going on the price of those, and that's the reason why.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I'd like to think not, but I sometimes wonder.
I mean, organisations have got a corporate social responsibility,
Yeah.
and they'll be measured against their environmental, social, governance goals as well. So, there's certainly, if there's not a desire from brands, there's certainly a regulatory need to be more compliant with their environmental agenda.
Yeah, but I think it's good, the fact that we are starting to see some change. We're talking to Patagonia, the previous 2 podcasts to this was actually quite eye-opener. It's also, we were talking off camera that there was different countries are adopting at different rates. So Scandinavia, it would appear, is way ahead of us in their thinking and doing, both, if you like, at a family level right the way through to a governmental level. And I would like to think that actually it's something that we can drive, and it's something, we've got to think about our kids, the air they breathe, the water they drink, and all of that. And it's important stuff, isn't it? It's the biggest crisis potentially facing humanity. But let's talk about, I guess the last thing would be to talk about is obviously your field, nutrition. And that can be quite divisive, can't it? When you hear somebody say you shouldn't eat meat, you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that, etc., etc. As you've already said about the contribution of meat into the food chain, etc., and its impact. But again, surely it's about individual responsible decisions.
It is, and we all have different bodies, don't we? So we react different ways to different foods, and there's a lot of information out there.
Can't see Harry living on lettuce and carrots, can you?
There's a lot of information out there, and as with most research areas, there's different perspectives and different theories about what it makes a balanced diet, and there's eat well plates and there's sustainable plates, and there's lots of governmental guidance about what we should eat and how we eat, but lots of different nutritionists will have different ideas about what's best for performance and what's best for performance. Scott Jurek was vegan, winning Western states long before veganism was popular, and I think that probably drove quite a big almost like a vegan movement in ultra running.
Yeah.
We do see in certainly an ultra level, it's more
It seems more
increasingly
prevalent,
common
doesn't it?
to adopt a plant-based diet. And I think, I'm not a nutritionist, so from the kind of nutritional perspective, it's not really my area, but from a sustainability perspective, certainly adopting more of a plant-based approach is limiting your impact, and there's not necessarily research that's suggesting that has any detrimental impact on performance in a sporting environment. And certainly a lot of professional runners are adopting quite a low meat diet. But it's certainly, like I said before, it's the single biggest thing that you can do to reduce your own environmental impact is to reduce less meat. But again, like I said, it's about, we're all hypocrites, there's no perfect scenario. It's not, we shouldn't, if we all went vegan overnight, it'd be disastrous for the environment.
Absolutely, but so many things. I always think, actually, when it comes to ultra running diets, for me, one of the biggest things that I always think about when you're talking about ultra runners is the best I reckon was Pinto's when he ran marathons. He always had a glass of wine with his evening meal. That to me sounds spot on.
Yeah. I was
I'm not sure about the environmental impact of that, but I quite like the idea of a glass of red.
When Camille Herron broke the 24-hour track record, was it 2 years ago? She did an interview and she said, I struggled at the end, so I got my support to go out and get me a Taco Bell and a couple of beers, and I thought that's my kind of race. Yeah. She's the world record holder, so
it must work.
Yeah. There's definitely some.
Well, it certainly works
some
for her.
logic in there. But I think it's about balance, isn't it? It's about making sure that we're eating the right kinds of things in the right quantity, and we've got those balance.
And it's like you say, we have to work out what's right for us, and I don't know. You talk to some people, and I get a little bit frustrated because we've got to still have choice, and I've actually seen where someone was so staunch vegan, and I'm not saying this is wrong, they never thought about the diet as a whole. They just thought it from the environmental point of view, doing some good, and they ended up with basically heart problems, which then came down to quite simply iron deficiency, and it had been building over a number of years, and they medically had to go on to iron supplementation, and initially they just accepted whatever they were given because they were not in a good place, but later on it's sort of like, okay, I need vegan iron pills, and apparently they really struggled to get at the time. But again, it's like you say, it's not just thinking about a dramatic change, say for one reason. We've got to think about what that impact is across, and what we're doing as an athlete, or even just a runner, someone who does park run and runs a couple of times a week. What's the impact on you going to be? How do you make sure that you're eating for recovery?
I mean, a fully plant-based diet, you can get absolutely all the nutrients you need from a really well-balanced plant-based diet, but at the same time, ketchup and chips is a plant-based diet. So you've got to be able to.
They do say that iron and B, I think it's B12 you should probably supplement if you're on a plant diet.
Absolutely.
I think it's those two.
Yeah.
If anybody knows better than me, they can pop the information down below. I'm not 100% certain, but I think I'm pretty right on that. And certainly if I'm working with runners that do a lot of mileage, I do suggest either have a chat with a nutrition, or they look at some sort of ethical that suits them supplementation, just to make sure.
Yeah, we're seeing some really good. You will know more than me, but it certainly feels to me like in the last 10 years there's been a bigger move towards more performance nutrition and kind of amateur running. So a lot of people are taking more performance gels, maybe they supplement with protein shakes, that kind of stuff. That's become a massive market now.
It has, and I'm very pleased to see in a lot of those cases they are adding nutrients, vitamins, minerals, etc. to those, and when they say it's vegan, they are vegan sourced. And I don't eat red meat at all, and I have found that my iron does drop very quickly, and I do eat a fair amount of green, and I've found that if I don't supplement, I'm in trouble. But I also found that I couldn't stop meat completely because basically I just didn't recover, and I couldn't find any way around it, even with more pulses, beans, etc. than you could shake a stick at. So I have come back a little bit to white meat, and again, that's just discovering along the path.
Exactly. It's what works for you, isn't it?
And,
some people, like with gels and things like that, some people get on with them, some people don't. And the only thing I say about gels, if you are using them, make sure you pick them up, put them in the bin. And there's some really good compostable brands now that we can.
That's starting to come through as well. And that's also actually being driven by some of the race organisers asking for it. So if they do lose a wrapper and they can't find it, then actually it's going to not hang around in the environment too long.
I think water's always a difficult one for races, particularly mass participation races, like tongue twister. Like marathons, for example, and how much water you have available, and people look at all the plastic bottles and kind of shudder at how much
Don't shudder too much, the sign wobbled.
it's not just the plastic
It'll
waste, but
decapitate
it's
this sign.
you know, you run up to an aid station in a marathon, you take a water bottle, you have 2 sips and you throw the whole bottle away. So it's the plastic, but also the water as well.
It's also convenient because who wants for 10,000 people to start pouring out cups at 5 food stations?
Yeah.
So you can kind of understand it, but yeah, that's how it was in days gone by. London Marathon, you picked a cup up. I can remember Great North Run, you picked a cup up. My favourite Great North Run was we went around every ice cream wagon, bought an ice cream van and did Chariots of Fire. Anyway, there's a story altogether.
There's the safety aspect, isn't there, of making sure that there's providing enough water as well. I remember, was it...
You say that, I can
Sheffield
remember
Half
going
Marathon?
over on a cup. That was the end of my race that year. But it could happen on a bottle as well. But yes, absolutely. But I think there's actually signs of stuff coming through. And I also there was a race up in the northeast and they created a link for car sharing for where you were coming from. The t-shirt, again, as you said, was a choice. I think they were saying that if you could bring your own drink and get it on the way round, that would be great. There's a couple of ultra races that insist on that now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bowls of water or tap, obviously water from containers, so you have to collect your own water.
Yeah, I know a fellow races now you've got to take a collapsible cup. So at the end of the race, if you want a drink, you have your own cup.
So there's lots of little things being done which actually make a lot of sense, and that's got to be good, hasn't it?
That's the principle, and that's all we can do as consumers is look at and reflect on the impact that we have and what we can do to mitigate against that.
I do struggle with the plastic bottle thing when people turn up, when you're thinking, why haven't you got a container you just bring to training all the time, and we all get to know that, oh, that's such and such bottle because that's the way. Usually the one with the dent in, isn't it, Chris? Let's be honest, the one that fell off the car.
We've all got the same bottle.
We've all got the same bottle,
it's hard
but
to tell whose is whose.
Yeah, so we wait for them to come off the top of the car so we work out which dent is which. Did actually manage to get the dent out of my bottle. You know, it's all of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's got to be good. So, let's just wrap up. What are you doing next, running wise? Where are you off to?
Immediately, we're going off to a session, and the next race will be for Wooler. So we're going to go to Wooler Trail Half Marathon in Northumberland in a few weeks.
And we will be car sharing.
We will. We'll be taking a full contingent up. I think there's going to be a good.
I think there's 2 cars, isn't there? About 8 of us in.
We'll go up for the weekend. We'll enjoy the trails. We'll have a good race on the Sunday, and then we'll come home. Hopefully with some good results.
Yeah, and a nice social thing.
Yeah.
You've actually had a really good year.
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
You've had a half marathon PB or 2.
Yeah, a couple of first two half marathons, both PBs. Obviously, the first one's always going to be a PB. But
yeah,
that was good.
And then you equalled it and went a little bit quicker at the end of the year. And I believe you're the first Welshman to get an age group call up for England. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what my tide, which is Welsh for granddad, would think about me, think about that situation. But yeah, I did win an England best for the Masters category, so age group. So I'll be racing that next year.
I think you're gonna just
Better not take too many pictures.
Yeah. I think your halo might have slipped there, mate.
It does make me ineligible for winning and for competing for Wales for 12 months. So best make it worth it.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to pull that one out of the back window. So that's in Manchester next year, isn't it?
Yeah, at the Great Manchester.
Manchester.
Yep.
So excellent. From there next year, any thoughts and plans yet?
No, not really. Just continue to enjoy my running. Continue to work hard and see where it goes. I think long term I'd like to spend some time on the trails a bit more, but no kind of major goals really. It's just be competitive with myself and run as best as I can.
Keep getting better.
And if you do that, I think you naturally get better, but that's an output. Performance improvement's an output of the process, isn't it? So you get out what you put in. So you don't need to worry too much about the outcome if you get the process right.
Yeah,
the outcome
enjoying that process.
Yeah,
having fun with it. Cool. I think that wraps it up for today.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Chris, thanks for your insights and
No worries.
obviously
Thanks for having me.
being involved in shall we say, the research and the academic side of this. I think from what I'm hearing then is we just need to think a little bit more. Car sharing for events and training is a great thing to do. Think about that race t-shirt. Do we really need another one? Difficult when it's your first marathon. I think you kind of got to have it, haven't you, really? But do we need them from every single race? Think a little bit about our nutrition, and also just think about what we can be doing, sort of from plastic bottle use, that type of thing, with obviously water and nutrition. And really just sort of maybe just have a little think about the kit and the shoes that we do go out to buy, and what we're doing and what the company is doing out there environmentally or socially. So we feel better about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just think, just remember that nobody's perfect, and all you can do is reflect on your own actions and how you can make some positive changes while still meeting your own needs. You know? Maybe join the Green Runners. Green Runners are an organisation in the UK for people that are more environmentally conscious in terms of their running, and you can join them and pledge to be more environmentally conscious as well. So
I suggest we'll put a link for that at the bottom of this, and then people can have a look and make their own decision on that. Great. More work for Harry, he can't wait. He loves it. Well, we could talk nonsense for 10 minutes and really annoy him because he has to think about the editing, but I don't think we'll do that. He's already given me a look. He's given me a look that says you dare. So thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Stu.
Folks, hope you enjoyed that and you gleaned some useful information on things we can be doing, and we look forward to seeing you next time. See you, folks.